Welcome back to another episode of Projecting Grandeur. I am your host, Ron Dichter. I want to talk about a problem that many business owners face, and it's really simple. When you get stuck in anything in your business, what do you do? Where do you start? Where do you try to figure out what you're stuck on, what the problem is? And as I get into my new business, and I'm in full startup mode right now, I often am faced that question of like, okay, I have this thing, whether it is a process, whether it is a sales, whether it is a product, where I get stuck. And anytime I get stuck, I go linear. And I want to explain what that means because, there's a lot of times where people have these challenges that they face in their business and they get so overwhelmed with where to start. Like, how do I tackle this problem in front of me? And oftentimes the biggest challenge that people face in finding a solve is how to start. And we've all been there. We sit down at our desk, we start to talk in our head about the problem that we're dealing with, maybe even we're having conversations with our team. And as we start to feel through the problem, this sense of overwhelming nuanced challenges really faces us, where it's like, oh my gosh, there's all these things. I don't even know where to start. There's just so many tentacles to this thing. And that's not unique. We all go through that. So if you are feeling that, it's okay. Like, that is not an uncommon feeling as a business owner, and especially if you're in startup mode, to feel incredibly overwhelmed at any particular or many particular problems and the complexities and different ways to solve them. So I really like to think about things in a linear fashion, and let me explain what that means. Let's just say we have a product problem, and inside of the product, we have this whatever thing isn't working as we expected, whether it's a tangible product or a soft product. I like to think about things from a linear viewpoint. Think of it back when you were a child, if you were into modeling and building like model cars, and I had a buddy who was super into that, and the level of detail was always impressive to me as to how just frankly many pieces were in a model. But anytime you got to a place where something wasn't working in that model, you would go back to the instructions and you would go step by step, or even Legos. Like, my son was really into Legos as a kid, and he would get sometimes to a place where it wasn't working, or he had these pieces that didn't make sense. And I would always tell him, go back to the instructions and start back at step one and figure out where the miss was. So if you have a product problem, obviously there's some sort of creation process in that product. Oftentimes a step backwards is the easiest way to a jump forward. And you need to go back and retrace your steps from the beginning and figure out where something stopped working. Maybe you had a hypothesis about the product was going to do this, and you got to that point and it didn't work. Well, go backwards in your hypothesis and figure out what went wrong, what didn't go as you had expected that caused this thing to not work the way you had intended. Same with a deliverable. Let's say you have a onboarding for whatever your product or service is, and you're not sure kind of what step 7 looks like. Sometimes you just need to start back at the beginning and walk through what it is you're trying to accomplish, so that you can figure out where you took a wrong turn, or where you maybe need to take a different turn to get a different result. Same with sales. As you go through sales, I hear this all the time because I spend a ton of time with our sales team. Like, I'm stuck at this objection. And rather than trying to answer the objection, my question is, how did you get to that objection? Like, what happened in your pitch that led to that objection coming up? And is there something that we can add to the pitch or do differently in the pitch so that that objection doesn't even come up in the first place? And we get so, as a business owner, so focused on the thing that's right in front of us, when oftentimes it's not the thing that's in front of us that's the problem. It's something that happened before that thing ever came to fruition that caused that problem to happen. And so as I think about how I solve problems myself, I like to be very linear. I like to go back and start in a sequential, step-by-step process to figure out where the breakdown happened. And Look, there are a lot of people who have, the ability, or at least they claim they have the ability to, be able to look at an assortment of problems at one time and be able to figure out how, like a jigsaw puzzle, they fit together. Well, my brain is not that smart. I like to, decouple things from each other, look at them in, kind of singular strands so that I can figure out how that singular strand works, and then obviously figure out where things aren't working. And then once I have these singular strands, then I figure out how to weave them together to create, a series of strands that work in concert together. And so it's just really important as you start looking at your own business and your own, I mean, frankly, even if you're just in your own, role as in your career, don't try to get overwhelmed by problems. Take things back, look at them in a linear fashion, and what you will find more often than not is the problem that you are solving isn't being solved by the problem at hand, but something that happened long before that problem happened. I have a lot of friends that play golf and tennis, and they're always complaining about, elbow injuries. And what they often find is that it's not their elbow that's the problem. It's actually something in their shoulder that's causing the downstream problem happening in the elbow. But they're trying to fix their elbow, but the problem is actually higher up in their arm. Same concept. Looking at problems linear allows you to start thinking about things in a much more concise fashion and allow you to really focus on, what the steps were that led to that problem that then you can solve. And what's really great about doing it is as you start looking at things in a linear fashion, you have a way more, deep knowledge of your actual business, of how things work, and you can actually start thinking about things from a more strategic standpoint because you understand the tactical nuances of your business. So there's a lot of benefit. So when you get stuck, my advice is look at things from a start to finish standpoint, whether it's product, whether it's deliverable, whether it's sales, it doesn't matter. Look at what you're trying to accomplish, go back to the steps in sequence that you're trying to solve, and then figure out if there was something that happened earlier in the process that led to the problem. And maybe you'll find one little tweak, one little change, one little modification earlier on in the sequence eliminates the problem without ever actually having to address the problem or issue that you're dealing with. So I hope you find this helpful. Again, my goal is to help one person a day. I've learned a lot. I don't know everything. I learn every day myself. But what I do know is that if you keep thinking and keep trying and keep putting your best foot forward and keep being a sponge and listening and being open to new ideas, you can continue to grow. Even in my back half of my life, as I hit the 50-year mark here, I believe that I'm still learning every single day and becoming a better version of myself. And if I would have told myself back when I was 20 that this is what 50 would have felt like, I wouldn't have believed it, because I feel like I'm just getting going. Anyway, hope you find this helpful. Please remember to like and comment, and most importantly, share. Sharing is caring. Get the word out and share it to somebody who can benefit. Have a good day. Thanks.